At what point did you separate these stories of the wrestler and the ballerina?
Um, I think as soon as we started working on the wrestler, there was enough story there. The problem is when we started in wrestling, everyone thought wrestling was a joke and that there was no world there. But I refused to believe that because I was like, people dedicate their lives to this, and there's a whole world of it. So there has to be something interesting in that world. We just have to find it. And as soon as we started to meet some of the old legends that when I was a teenager I looked up to or I was a fan of for a couple of years, I started to hear these stories, and that's when I kind of saw a way in and realized it was a huge story. And that just
Yeah.
that meant the ballet was not going to be this film. I think after when we were editing The Wrestler, Mark Heyman, who was the director of development at my company, Protozoa, wanted to start writing again. And I said, well, what do you want to write? And he was like, I'd like to work on Black Swan, which had two previous writers, but was not quite making sense or working. And so we then started to develop it, and eventually it became its own thing. But the reason I think it's so connected to The Wrestler is they were overlapped in the making of them. So one was about the low art and one was about the high art, yet both had these performers who their bodies were their instruments. And the decay of the body was a big part of it.
Do you identify with the choreographer in Black Swan?
Not any more than any other character. I think every character I paint I'm connected to. I have to. It's the only way. When an actor's performing the role, my job is to sit there and feel and empathize and see if it's truthful. So every single character in the film, I'm equally connected. The mother, the dancer, of course, every character.
It wasn't easy working with the ballet world.
No.
Why?
I think at that point it was a very insular world. I think social media has changed it. I just actually was talking to a dancer recently who was saying, we were talking about some dancers who recently retired and how they were kind of the last generation of this insula, and she was pointing out how everyone's more connected now, and there's a larger connection to the other arts. But I think at the time we did Black Swan, ballet was very, very insular and not really interested in movies. Like normally you go, hey, I want to shoot a movie, and people are like, oh, cool, great, and they open up doors. No doors were opening for us. It was just a few dancers were like, oh, sounds interesting, and they'd give us a little time and talk to us.
So how did you do the research for it?
Little creaks, little cracks allowed me in, and we just kept pushing. And eventually, there was a few prima ballerinas that I got to talk to and meet and see how they work. And then Benjamin Millepied came on as the choreographer, and at the time was the principal dancer for the New York City Ballet, and so he then opened up a lot of doors for us.
What surprised you about that world? I think your sister did she train as a ballerina
Yeah.
or just study?
She went to performing arts in New York,
Yeah.
and the Fame School, and
Right.
was a dancer. And so I grew up with that in the background. She had all the posters of ballet slippers on her walls, but I was into Little League, so I didn't really pay attention that much to it. And but I always was curious what the hell those people were doing up there.
Yeah.
Because if you don't understand it, it's very bizarre, the movement, and it's a very strange art form that's kind of remained truthful in a classical way I don't know when the roots were, but a long time ago.
It strikes me that the artists you show in your film, by the way, whether they're committed to the art of wrestling or ballet or poetry in the mother, are not very joyful people. But you seem pretty joyful. I don't know. Is this the other side of Darren Aronofsky, or?
I think it's the character I paint. I think you're making a 90-minute entertainment where you're painting a character which is complicated, but definitely has a point of view of what you're trying to say. So it'll never be as complicated as a real human, any character in any movie. That it's always going to be shaved in a certain way to sort of fit a narrative. And so you basically push characters certain ways that become usually more extreme versions so that they're identifiable.